So this, it's such an honor to be here. I am so blown away by the stories I've heard so far, and am excited about the ones I'm about to hear. You'll hear more. I'm an adoptee. The coolest thing about this happening right now is that I started writing this piece a few months ago, and it ended with I'm never going to find my birth mother because we're connected, and I'm scared that if I connect with her, the connection I feel will fall apart or something will disappear. 2 weeks ago, I found her. Today, she read this piece and gave me some feedback because she's, like me, a folklorist. So she's here. She'll get this, and I'm so just thrilled. I've anonymized her. We're just getting to know each other before I go on cable TV and start telling her story. This is my story, but she's given me informed consent to be a part of this. She was adopted. So at 22, my birth mother gave me up. What I found, we talk one hour every Friday. Last Friday's lesson was that she was adopted and that my grandmother, and I won't name her now, but I think as time goes on, we'll figure out what stays anonymous and what doesn't, gave her up for adoption at 17. So I get to be on this journey with someone else who's very much wise about this, and we get to have this journey together. It's very, very much in motion right now, so it's exciting. It's very emotional. So I've edited this now to include what's unfolding before our very eyes. I hope it makes sense. I'm proud of it. In the water of my birth mother's home, there was music, and I was home. I'm going to start that one over. In the water of my birth mother's womb, there was music, and I was home. We were mermaids, and this is what I know. Flung from my beautiful musical bathysphere out into the territory of the landlubbers, a woman who had adopted me from some nuns in Newark pulled a tattered sheet of notebook paper from a box in the bedroom closet. I was 7. Maybe I had asked. She treated the paper as she treated her adopted daughter. Foreign, but somehow hers to manage. Imbued with magic, but not the kind she could understand. Notes she had said she had taken when she got the call from Catholic Charities that they had a baby to give her. Someone else's baby. Dad was somewhere else, as always. 1984. The woman huffed at the scribbles on the half sheet of torn paper. Perfect Catholic school loops of writing, but rendered maniacally and without any rhythm or meaning. Her hands shook. She was weeks away from being hospitalized for what I would later recognize as a psychotic break. There were to be many. I never got to hold the paper myself. I don't know what of the story was actually written here, or what was apocryphal. It was all out of my hands. Before that night, I had known I was adopted, but very little else. This is the story she told. All we wanted was a baby, and we tried and couldn't have one, and we went to the nuns and asked them to help us. When you were 2 weeks old, we got a phone call, and I was overjoyed. 2 days later, we packed a little suitcase with clothes for you and a little comb and diapers and pajamas, and we drove from Saddlebrook all the way to Newark, where the nuns led us to a back room and opened the door. And there you were, smiling, with one eye open and one eye closed, and I knew you were mine. The first wound for adoptees is the primal wound. It's called relinquishment trauma, the terror that comes from being torn from your mother's voice, her heartbeat, her rhythms of sleep and activity, her ways of moving through the world. She gave you up right away after you were born, and she decided to not even hold you. She handed you to the nuns, and they took you away, and they named you Colleen because you had green eyes and you looked Irish, and that is your middle name now. The second wound is called genealogical bewilderment. You can't make sense of being in your body and mind. You talk too fast, your hair is too tangly, your growth too explosive and too awkward. They gawk at you, the strange long legs. Why are you so bad at basketball? Why can't you get married and own a nice car like your cousins? The father was a hippie. He had long hair and played the drums. The mother was a singer. That's what they were called, the father and the mother. Was a singer and played the piano. She told the nuns that if you ever wanted to study music, we should encourage you. Maybe her mother didn't let her study music, I don't know, but that's what she told the nuns to tell me. The third wound is estrangement from the adopted family. When they pick you up, they are dislocating you in two ways, removing you from what you know, and then dislocating you from amongst themselves as well. Like magnets stuck together with the wrong polarity, you know what I mean? They're stuck, but they're wonky, and you're stuck, you can't get out, right? Crooked and uncomfortable. They did you this favor, and you bear their name, and that is that. They do not know that she sang to you. I have never really been able to recognize myself in the mirror. It doesn't add up. The parts look different from day to day. People describe me, and that seems to make sense until I find myself looking back from the bathroom wall, unable to trace my own contours. So tall, so redhead, so odd, half person, half something else. Stranger, moving through the world without an anchor. But there had once been a home in the water, and when I heard my mother sing, I could feel my swimming start to stir and grow fins. This piece of paper was a magical portal to an amniotic home. It saturated the room and warmed and soaked my parched baby bones. The longing. Maybe I felt a little flutter of some ancient gills pumping and flapping for air, preparing for what was to be a very long journey. I swear I could hear her singing to me. Every night as a child and every day still now, I would fill the bathtub up to my neck and hide in its folds with the radio on. All my life, the song of the sea pulls me toward it. The people who took me drove me from the Atlantic coast to Iowa, but as soon as I could, I began to fling myself back to the sea. Huntington, San Francisco, Dakar, Virginia Beach, Alicante, Ocracoke, Portland. I dream of water. The water where we begin, without weight, without worry, immersed in sound and sensation, beckons to us. I began writing this book in the days after my younger brother took his own life, about a year ago. He was also adopted a few years behind me from another mom with other nuns. Adoptees are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than their peers. 4 times. After that call, I knew that I was lost, and I dreamed of mermaids. In my grieving, I sought you out. I took the genetic test, and I found you. You were waiting for me. In our first conversation, you told me that you sang me sea shanties when I was in your room. And I knew that when I wrote this back in May before I found her a couple weeks ago. In fact, songs are your life. Like me, you are a professional folklorist who has spent her life recording, singing, and amplifying the songs of the sea and beyond. You called me darling once, and then again. I was counting. The third darling was the next time we talked, when I told you how much it had meant to me. You looked at me and called me darling again, and I forgot to breathe. You saw me, and you said it was okay to cry. I covered my face. I'm not used to anyone seeing me at all. I do not know what I look like. I do not know how to be held, but you are showing me. Cultural theorist Stuart Hall tells us that people do not have an identity. We are not born with one in our DNA, just a collection of possibilities. Although we were placed amongst our identities by name, checked boxes on the census, the way we are seen and called, there's simply one cultural or interpersonal or familial story brushed upon another. We navigate many conflicting lifelong processes of identification. We tangle with them, throw them off, work them out. We avoid the traps and seek the ones that make us safe or that set us free. We hunger for what Caribbean theorist Edouard Glissant calls a poetic of relation. When we connect with the world in a way that makes sense, and that connection resonates within us, we start to belong. Our identities are not static, they're in flux and require constant seeking and circulation. You and I sought each other out coast to coast. And the great experiment now coming to an end, that was the adoption wave of the 20th century. We never talked about identification, and we took belonging for granted. But identity and belonging are essential. I have always needed to belong to someone. We all need to be imprinted and to be called. The nuns told the people who took me that you chose not to hold me after you gave birth to me, that you did not want to bond with me so that you could more easily give me up. That was the best possible outcome. Imagine hearing that at 7 years old. You told me otherwise in between the first 2 times you called me darling. In the maternity ward in Newark in 1976, the women who surrounded you, poor women, immigrant women, women of color, most of them single moms like you, the mothers told you not to listen to the nuns, to disobey them, and to hold me. And that was the best possible outcome. You held me for 3 days, and you sang me the Irish songs of the sea. You left a watermark, I swear. I remember your voice as you sang me sea shanties in your arms. You must have called me darling. I identify as darling. You tell me you are not surprised that we are both folklorists, each of us spending our lives trying to understand the ways that voices connect people and places and stories together. You tell me that you had asked the nuns to promise to give me to musicians and found out later that they lied to you, those nuns. You apologize for losing me. I tell you I'm writing a book about mermaids, and you take a breath. Allie, you say, I know you can't see my lower half, but it is covered in scales and ends in a fishtail. We fall into laughter, and our big white front teeth and soft Irish cheeks flash across the continent like beacons. Nerds, bleeding hearts, funny girls, sisters, mothers, nun fighters, holders and behelders, laugh too louders. You call me darling one more time. What do I call you? Your water was my home, and there was music there. The water holds a space for us in between people. We are tied together. This is work for the in-between people. Those of us whose lives on land only make half sense, if that. For many of us, our last safe place was in the womb. For others, the water calls us to swim across channels and to cross oceans to find a way of belonging. Mermaids don't walk a linear path. We traverse the water in any direction at any time with music as our wayfinder. This work is called Mermaid Music, and this is why I'm writing it. I'm a storyteller and a praise singer, descended from storytellers and praise singers, immersed in the oceanic possibilities that come from growing up groundless, from endless seeking, from the music that lives in the wound. I sing the praises of a world full of mermaid deities, of moms and wombs, of the sirens beckoning us out to sea, of the freedom that comes with untethering ourselves from the mast, diving through the waves, leaving nuns in our wake. And I just have a little bit about mermaids. And I also want to shout out to Serene, my son. That's who's inspiring all this work, of course. The Little Mermaid was bored underwater. So I went up to the sand to collect the what'd you say? I love you, Serene. She went up to the sand to collect the cowrie shells there. There, the police arrested her. But her grandmother made them let her go. The cowries belong to the sea, she said, and the Little Mermaid is the princess of the sea. All's well that ends well. All's well that ends well. And that's an African song about Mami Wata, traditional song of Burkina Faso. In 1989, the little girls of America returned to the seas. The release of Disney's epic underwater princess fantasy, The Little Mermaid, was met with more than $6 million in weekend gross and brought with it a kind of mermaid madness the side of the Atlantic had never known. It moved slowly across the ocean to South Korea, then Europe, and then to the rest of the world. Kids everywhere strapped seashell brassieres over their pajamas, fastened waist-length ginger wigs to their hairlines, and pinched their waists with lavender sashes hung with iridescent scales. They learned Ariel's songs of longing for their junior high talent shows, held their proms under the sea. In the blockbuster film, our mermaid heroine spurns her dad, the controlling sea king Triton, to grow legs and pursue Eric up on the land with the humans. Disney's treatment was based on Hans Christian Andersen's folklore of the same name, but there are a number of differences. In the traditional tale, the prince refuses to marry the Little Mermaid. He does not love her, and transformed into a landlubber, she's not only torn from her voice, but from her tongue altogether. Instead of saving her own life by ritualistically stabbing her prince through the heart and bathing in his blood, she turns to sea foam and rides the waves for eternity, ever present, ever free. If the Little Mermaid was allowed to be fully herself, like the figures of folk tales before her, a halfway person, the mermaids of America would have turned feral on their would-be masters. Imagine that on Christmas weekend, 1989, they streamed out of the theaters singing songs of the sirens. Imagine they descended upon the streets and began to dismember and devour the grown men of the suburbs, to tear down the structures of the city, and to shred and to bring the rains. They would be singing their weird songs, the sound skipping across the surface of the streets to lure men to their fate, to tear them apart and to feast upon their flesh, or to pull them undersea to become their lovers. They would have bopped the sailors who attempted to capture them on their foreheads and thrown them in cages, where they would be paraded to the beach and dragged down underwater to remain their servants forever. Imagine that shoulder to shoulder with the Ariels were just as many Ursulas, themselves mermaids, but the kind with octopus booties rather than the sleek, fishy variety. Instead of Ariel's songs, they would chant the sea witch's lines from the film. Now I am ruler of all the ocean. The waves obey my every whim. The sea in all its toils bow to my power. Ursula's objective was never to win the heart of the prince, but to steal the trident of the sea king and to rule. Imagine mermaids of all kinds, all shapes, sizes, skin tones, and genders. Mermaids with braces, mermaid adoptees, mermaids with wheelchairs, mermaids with freckles, and long, beautiful locks with cowries woven in. Some mermaids are half salmon, others shift to half fish, or half horse, or half bird, and back. Some mermaids are mermen or merfolk who inhabit their gender with fluidity and experimentation. Imagine that they are joining the mermaid parade too. Imagine that in Ulster, the Selkies slip on their sealskins and the Suvarnamachas of Thailand regrow their fins. In the Andersen tale, the little mermaid never meant to spend her life above the sea, stripped of her ability to swim, for the sake of a mediocre prince. What she really wanted was to live forever, something she heard humans were able to do in heaven after they died. She wanted to live forever because she loved her life. Her heaven was not dry, parched with the sun, measured footprint by footprint. It was dripping with possibility. The mermaids I want to sing, us mermaids, are not incomplete humans who do not know how to live on land. We are already queens in our undersea empires. We were meant to rule the waters. Whoever would sacrifice the joys and abundance of the deep, the weightlessness of the water, to walk, to run, to stay all day in the sun, silent and earthbound? Whoever would want to be a part of that world? She who holds the water in her womb, or flutters her way through the tide pools. She whose voice entangles the beleaguered and subverts them into her underwater realm. She whose power is water. Many others like her, hand in hand, out to the coastlines, down to the ocean, to reclaim our place down where it's wetter, down where it's better, under the sea. These are the mermaids I want to sing.